Watch the whole Act Man Andy Pants. Most is inconsequential.
But this part is very relevant.
I never have watched this. I have no idea what even happened here.
Told you, I think it's incredibly strange to talk about Concord and not. Told you, I think it's incredibly strange to talk about Concord and not mention the clear woke slop. And you make fun of people who use the word woke, and you never use the word, even though it completely describes what's going on right now in gay games.
So the thing about the word woke is it harkens back to that old story we all read and were taught when we were growing up, the boy who cried wolf. These days, it's the boy who cried woke. There is so much disingenuous criticism using the word woke. The word is so liberally applied to every...
This is why we banned it on the subreddit, by the way, for a while. Is because people use the word woke the same as they use the word, like, racist or, like, a few other things. Where it's like, this is like basically it's like a filler word because I don't know how to actually define what the problem is. So I'm just going to use like this bucket word that somehow is going to apply. DEI is the new woke? Yeah, DEI is, yeah, exactly.
Thing because there are so many...
There's two races in video games. There's white and woke.
Online grifters who produce daily outrage content that are saying this thing is woke, you should be angry, you should be upset. Tune in tomorrow for episode 4169 on why Star Wars is woke now and why you should hate it and be mad and angry and upset.
Yeah.
There's so much of that going on that the ending of the story of the boy who cried wolf is that at the end there was a wolf out there, but because there were so many false claims of there being a wolf, the people didn't help him. So that's what's happened with the word woke. When I hear somebody... So
I think that Actman's bringing up a really good point here, and I think the best example of that point is that a lot of people have labeled games like Space Marine 2 as woke because it has, I guess, like a female commander in it. And I feel like that's not really what's happening. And a lot of people, well, sorry, that's actually not true. A lot of people is inaccurate. You're correct in correcting me on that. There is like a list of like what games are woke and what games are not woke. And I think Elden Ring and Space Marine 2 were put on that list. So when you paint with such a broad brush that almost anything could be, if you interpret it in this way, could be perceived as woke, you end up devaluing the word. No, I'm being serious, right? Baldur's Gate 3 too? Well, I could see Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 makes a lot more sense that it's woke because you can engage in homosexual relationships. You can, I think they have pronouns in the game. You can change a character's genitalia with, like, not having them have a different body. I feel like Baldur's Gate 3, like, you could make an argument that, like, yeah, sure, this is a woke type thing, right? It's just that people don't care because it seems like it's an authentic product. And so I think that what happened is that people are trying to like identify every instance of something being woke. But I think that if you retroactively apply this to a lot of other games, you would see other games in the past that have also had this issue as well, right? So like, for example, with like Space Marine 2, you could also say like Gears of War, right? Would also be woke because of Coltrane and Dom, right? So that seems like kind of a bad argument, a bad way to look at it. So the problem is that I think that people have started using the term woke for too many different things, or Halo, right? Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, wow, Master Chief has a woman that knows everything, that tells him what to do. And, Sergeant Johnson's like this black guy and like, he tells everybody else what to do, right? If you want to look at everything through that lens, it's like if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I do think Actman's bringing up a good point that if everything is woke, then nothing is. And I think that the problem is that Concord, which is like, in my opinion, definitely a woke game, like 100%, is that if you don't figure out a way to like grade this or to have any sort of like measured criticism, you can't say Concord is as woke as Space Marine 2, right? Like this is, it's like, it's beyond retarded. So that's a huge issue. And I think it's making it hard for people that are like against this kind of stuff to be taken seriously because they're doing things that are unserious. If you accept everything, you stand for nothing. Well, yeah, but like this is like the opposite. Like if you don't if you don't stand for anything, then all you're doing is laying down. You're doing nothing. So it's like you have to be measured in your criticism and your feedback.
It's what happened to the words racist and sexist a few years ago.
He's right.
People
That's
were
exactly
saying
what I
like air conditioning sexist and you know,
right,
all this stupid
Which, by
shit.
the way, that was a real title. That was a legitimate thing. Women were saying that air conditioning was sexist.
It is racist and sexist, and it destroyed the meaning that those words are supposed to have.
He's right.
The boy who cried racist.
Nazi is the worst one. I think Nazi and slavery are two of the worst ones that are used now, because people use, like, for example, I'm working at a job that doesn't treat me well as slavery. And like, they don't like, it's just, I think it downplays, like, we have real slavery, right? Like now we have real slavery. It's not in the US. Like, and by the way, if you are trying, like, if there's like 3 smart Redditors in chat that are like, oh, what about prisons? Nothing like slavery. Nothing like actual slavery. If you think that, you're a retard, read a book. Anyway, just look it up on Wikipedia. It'll take you 5 seconds to learn that you're stupid. So if you compare that to like what's happening in, like, you know, Africa, etc., that is actual slavery in some cases, right? It is really bad. And so people that compare those two things, I think, are being like very, very disingenuous, and they're like hijacking the emotional baggage of a word to make their own argument or their own feelings more important. And I think Nazi is the same thing. Like, the amount of times that I hear people being called Nazis because they don't want open borders or they're like Donald Trump fans is way too much.
The boy who cried sexist. The boy who cried woke. These are 3 books in a volume. Okay,
He's right.
That all have the same ending.
dude. So it's. I mean, you're a video game critic and you do video game analysis. So I find it shocking that you don't see the pattern in a game like Concord having 3 black females in it and not a single white man.
Oh, it did have a white guy in it, but I think the problem is that a lot of the people that have discussions about this topic have, like, they've already made up their mind about it, and they're looking at it from a one-dimensional perspective. And I think that's what happens with people that are like super anti and super pro this type of like inclusion, because they're not really looking at it. Both of these extremes trend to the perspective of, I am basing my opinion on things off of something that is not happening, basically, right? Exactly what happened to just make a good game. People are too emotional. Yeah, well, it's also that people are not really willing to like concede any ground. And I think if you're not really willing to see like the sense of like what other people are saying, then I think that you can't be reasoned with, right? You can't have people understand what your perspective is. So yeah, what if everything really is woke? I feel like then at that point, then the term doesn't mean anything. Because like, it's kind of like, remember what I was saying before about how I don't like how people call things scams? Like for example, like Lunchly or like the Pokemon cookies. They're not really a scam. They're just overpriced. And I think that if you use the word scam, a scam is when you buy something and you don't get what you paid for, fundamentally, right? So like, you buy something, they don't give the thing to you, or you buy something and you get something else. Or you buy something under the pretense of one thing, and then what's advertised and what's given are 2 separate things, right? So that's what an actual scam is. And so having overpriced products or having products that are stupid are not scams. They're just overpriced garbage. And so if you take the word, and again, I think that's what happens. People like to take the word and then expand it so they can have that emotional control over the conversation. You know, Pokemon cookies were a scam because they almost want to claim to be. If you want to make the health argument, the health benefit argument, I think that's a fair argument to make, and I think that's totally fine. But that's not the argument that most people were making, and so I'm really talking about the price of the cookies being a scam. I don't think something being overpriced makes it a scam. That's not how things work. So yeah, it's turning it into a buzzword. Exactly. Speaking of scams, the day before offers are offering dinners for them for $12K. I'm sure they are. I mean, those guys are trying whatever they can to make money. McDonald's is a scam compared to receiving compared to real received staff versus ad. Oh, McDonald's, Taco Bell is getting sued for that. So you're right about that. Woke has always been as a derogatory term for inauthentic representation, but randoms co-opted it for anything they don't like. Yeah, I think that's true. But yeah, that's my perspective. The entire subreddit when Ghost of Yotai was announced. I think that the problem is that, so the Ghost of Yotai, like we talked about this like for like an hour yesterday, so I don't want to waste a lot of time on it. But like, the problem is that we've seen a lot of franchises replace male lead characters with female lead characters, and oftentimes it feels like it's a disingenuous reason. So when you see it happening now, it's like, okay, well, if this has happened 10 other times, humans are programmed to recognize patterns. People think it's happening again. Now, every time it's not the case, but when you have so many cases where it was the case, who cares? Well, they do, obviously. That's why they're talking about it. What do you mean, who cares? Like, what do you mean? They care. That's why they're talking about it. So, yeah, what do you mean, who cares? I mean, if enough people care, well, who cares? Like, obviously people care. What do you mean? It only takes a few bad instances to ruin it for everyone. Yeah, and I think that that's what's happened with people. So that's why people are so upset about it. And again, the problem is that there's very clearly, like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think, like, the best way to say it. There's very clearly, like, a logical reason for why people think this way. And there's also a logical reason why that might be the wrong way of thinking. But with the two groups of people that try to, like, argue this stuff, neither one of them want to acknowledge that the other side has a perspective that has any validity. So it's either like, oh, wow, you just want all the characters to be males and you hate women, or, oh, you want all the characters to be gay because you hate men. So, like, there's no, like, reasoned discussion. There's no middle ground. There's no trying to listen to another person's perspective. There's just, I'm right and you're wrong, and this is why. So, yeah, it gets convoluted. Exactly. There's no giving ground. People don't want to see anything.